tonight's program is on the potter's body. I guess everybody here has one. So that's a good thing, you know?
At least one.
Right. And it's still working, hopefully, but
somebody has a broken arm.
Uh-oh. Not good. So tonight's program is going to focus on thinking about how we move when we're moving, and maybe some suggestions about how we might be doing that more mindfully, and then also some exercises that we might put into our daily practice that are going to help us stay at these jobs for a little bit longer. And the program's going to have like 2 pieces to it. There'll be a video shot in studio with a potter and just some general observations and suggestions so that we can kind of see it in action. And then following that, our presenter will actually work us through some exercises, and hopefully you can get up and do some stretching and moving as part of tonight's program. So without saying a whole lot more, I want to introduce Breena Maggio to you. She's been involved since 1997 in helping people work with less pain and age well. She started as a personal trainer and a group fitness instructor, and she is a restorative exercise specialist with nutritious movement. That's actually how I had an opportunity to meet her. And it's really, you know, her interest is in helping people understand that our health, well-being of our bodies is a direct result of our posture and the way that we move and the habits that we have every day. And her goal is to help us transform those so that we are better doing the things that we'd like to do. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce Breena to you. And if you have anything you'd like to share, go for it. And when you're ready, I will put the video on.
That was a fabulous introduction. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I'm really glad that Barbara invited me to come and speak with you guys. I'm a crafter, but I'm not a potter. But what we went through in the studio, as you'll see in the video, it applies to life in general. There are specific things that we do when we're doing specific tasks. And habits that we acquire, and then we forget about our bodies when we're really engrossed in our work, and we might find ourselves in some weird positions that maybe after an hour create some pain, but after maybe a few years or a few decades can have some residual effects on our bodies because we're adapting all the time. So you'll hear in some of my language that I'm not a potter, but I think you'll get some really good tips from what we talk about. And I also want to make a point that in a lot of what I say, I think I repeat myself several times in the video, that I kind of oversimplify it, that you know, just think about what you're doing and just move, which is way easier said than done, especially when you're not thinking about your body because you're thinking about the piece that's in front of you. And I also say a lot of times, like, it doesn't have to be complicated, keep it simple, it doesn't have to be fancy, you don't have to spend a lot of money. So I try to give you as many practical tips as I can, usable, that you can take immediately right now, tomorrow, and start using these in practice. And also a good time to point out that a lot of what we're going to talk about applies to just your daily life activities. So doing dishes, working at the computer, driving your car. At one point I say something in the video about your car, and then I kind of never explain it. So I'll when we do the Q&A portion at the end, I have a couple notes to follow up with the video on some of the unfinished thoughts that are in the video. And then the live portion of the exercises, I did a practice run through, and it's going to be about 20 minutes, but it's going to be a lot of hand, forearm, neck, shoulder, back stretches. So it's going to feel really good. It's going to be awesome. So I hope you'll all stay for that. And if some of it you can only use one arm for, then just use that one arm. So before we start the video, I would like you to just take a minute to think about what hurts. So think about the last time you got up from the wheel. How did your body feel? Maybe the last time you walked away from the hand building table. How did your body feel? Maybe write it down, because maybe at the end of the stretching portion, maybe it'll feel different. Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Yay!
How would you pick that up? Okay. Okay. That was perfect. So the tendency for a lot of us is to bend forward from the back to pick things up. And in moving things out of the way, there's also rotation. So this flexion and rotation is actually a weaker point for the back, a weaker point for the actual vertebral discs in between the vertebrae. So we have the option to actually move at the hips, which allows the spine to stay in a more stable position or a more neutral position. So it gives you a little bit more to use with your butt. So if you actually even widen your stance a little bit and think about hinging more here to pick this up, to set this down, and pick the next one up to set it down. One point to be aware of when you're picking up heavier things is you might have one foot out in front, right? You're gonna have your favored side. So you might have one leg out in front, you might choose one arm over the other, but you have two sides. So a lot of what you're doing is gonna be one-sided, right? Whatever your preferred way of moving, whether you're picking something up, whether you're wedging or whether you're at the wheel, you're gonna have your favorite sides. So, so keeping in mind that a lot of what you're doing during your work time is going to be one-sided. So in the stuff that you can easily center or change sides, be mindful of trying out the other side, because you'll get stronger and you'll be more balanced. So your corrective exercise, your time outside of your work time, can be can add in the other side. In talking about hip hinging, we're talking about flexing at the hip joint versus the spine. So this would be spinal flexion. This is the way most of us bend forward. It's pretty common. And we might not move at the hips at all. So the pelvis might not actually go forward at all. But we want to practice moving more from the hip joint. But I like to talk about the hip crease because it's easier to see. You can feel it. You put your hands right in the hip crease and bend forward. If your tailbone is going up, and bend forward while you're doing this, you should feel that kind of pinch your fingers in there a little bit. Now, if you did the same thing but bent from your spine, you see how that doesn't really move, okay? So if you could see this in a mirror, which we don't have in the ceramic studio, you would see that your tailbone goes up as you hinge forward. So what that's actually looking like, so if this is your pelvis here, your pelvis is actually going forward when you hinge forward. So the relationship between your leg and your pelvis is this. And you can do this with a straight leg or you can do this with a bent knee. So it really kind of depends on what you're picking up. But if you're picking up something that's lower to the ground, you're probably going to want to bend your knees to get there. You might even go with a wider stance to get there to pick something up versus trying to come all the way down here, because many of us don't have the length in the hamstrings to actually get that far over and the knees to get there. You might even go with your split stance like you did and have a little bit more strength with the quads. So a lot of this is just going to depend on your body parts, what your knees do, what your hips do, how much length you have in your own muscles. So if you have really tight hamstrings or really tight quads, or you have a knee replacement or a hip replacement, some of these might need to be altered a little bit just to fit your body. So having said that and kind of seeing that, so let's do the same thing. Let's do that hip hinge. Yeah, and so the difference between just hinging over. So, and can you feel the length back here in your hamstrings? Can you feel like that stretch out a little bit?
If I keep it straighter, if I get my knees no not.
Right. So your hamstrings, which are the muscles that go down the back of your leg, they connect from your pelvis to below your knee. So if you bend your knee, we actually put slack into those muscles. But it gives us the opportunity to actually use the glutes, your booty, to assist when you come back up. So if we do that kind of like a squat, like you're gonna kind of sit down into a chair, pretend like you're gonna reach out and grab a big thing of clip, and then you're gonna stand up. Your butt is there to help you stand back up. Versus if you're bending over from your back to try to pick something up, your back has to do all the work. So you do that repetitiously, takes its toll. Little tiny joints, little tiny muscles. We want to use the bigger joints and the bigger muscles, okay, to balance that out. So when you're moving materials, whatever it is, we've got all the buckets of clay and materials here. Probably best to move stuff out of your way to get to heavier things that might be behind or underneath. So this bucket is probably 25 pounds, maybe more. And so my tendency would be to pick it up from the base so that I have more strength. So I can keep my elbows in, I can keep my shoulders down, and I can use my core and my biceps, which are stronger muscles for me, to lift this, to move it out of the way. And your tendency might be to lift something and twist to set it down. But if you can move and keep the object closer to you and set it down, bending knees, butt sticking out to get the item towards the floor, and then picking it back up if you have something that's lower to the ground this way, kind of reversing that. The other option would be to actually use the handles. And this feels a lot less stable to me and a lot more. We've got really skinny handles here. You can pick it up from none of that feels as strong to me as picking it up this way. So when you're picking up heavy objects, you want to make sure you keep the object close to your body. So this is all basic lifting technique. So that hip hinge that we just did, sticking the butt out that we just did, that's part of lifting heavy things. So one of the things that I noticed in getting back here, because I was just trying to get this filmed, is that the way that I'm standing, because these buckets are in the way, is I've got all my weight on my right leg and no weight on my left leg, which might not be the best way to do that. But if you're working quickly, you might not want to move all this stuff out of the way. Probably best to take the time to move things out of the way or get yourself closer to the object. So now I've got two legs to support me to move this out of the way. When we're moving clay, so this looks like this is a full bag of clay, so this should be about 25 pounds. So you want to face whatever you're doing whenever possible. So as opposed to trying to pull this out from the side, again, that's not going to be really the best position for your back and your spine to be in. So you want to face this as much as possible, pull it out, and then get it close to you. And then when you're carrying it, that you keep it close to your body. Elbows in, shoulders down. And one of the things that you may find in paying attention to how you're moving is that in keeping your rib cage down, you actually get your core muscles to help you when you're moving things around as well. So being in the split stance and rocking forward and back so that you actually have your body weight to push into the clay, so there's less work in the upper body. Your hands can be supple and mobile in manipulating the clay, but that your body weight can be doing most of the work. Paying attention to what you're doing with your shoulders so that your shoulders aren't up around your ears and your elbows aren't out here. You're gonna have a stronger base to have your elbows pulled in close to your body and your shoulders down away from your ears. And that's gonna be true for pretty much anything that you're doing. Any of the activities that you're doing, any of the parts of the process, shoulders down, elbows in. And that tendency to kind of get up in here, it's the same tendency that you might find yourself pouring your coffee using your upper traps rather than using your arm. And a lot of that has to do with shoulder mobility. In addition to like your stance and how you're moving, if you're doing the spiral, that the movement is happening with the clay and not with your body. So like it's a very subtle movement that's happening with the clay. Like your body isn't spinning around to create the spiral, just a manipulation with the clay. And then the height of what you're wedging on is going to affect how your body has to move to get the clay to do what you need it to do. So if you're very tall or very short, your table is lower or higher, that's going to affect how you're having to manipulate the clay. So if you have the ability to change the height of what you're wedging on, that might be a benefit as well, at least something to pay attention to. With picking up heavy things, how you're moving towards the wheel, moving from the hips versus moving from the back, that's one piece to pay attention to. And then what's happening at the feet. So we've got the pedal on the other side. This is not going to be a really stable position to be in. Plus, and she's doing this partly to help level out the pelvis. So we've got the trick of putting something underneath, which actually works kind of like your car. But so this is a really great trick for doing that as well. And if you find it hard to actually tip forward at the pelvis here, you can put something underneath your butt that makes it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to stick this little rolled up towel, and it's just a skinny towel. It's not something, you don't need anything fancy, and it's not something that's really going to get in the way. But can you kind of feel that under your sit bones? Right. So as you tip forward, it's kind of a reminder to help let the pelvis tip forward. As the wheel is going, and you're having, so the wheel's going one direction, and you've got however much clay you've got here. So we've got a small amount of clay, but if you've got more clay, heavier clay, your body is having to resist what the wheel and the weight of the clay are doing to your body. So you're actually being twisted, and you're having to resist the twist. So that core stabilization, it's not just a centering, but you're constantly resisting being pulled this way, right? The wheel is pulling you this way. It's just like when you're walking. We tend to think of things in a very linear way. We tend to think of how the body moves in a linear way. We don't tend to think of the rotations, but there's a lot of rotation involved in this activity. And here you're being rotated by the machine, right? So understanding that it's not just the fact that I have to center myself in front of the wheel and in front of the clay, but that I'm also doing a subtle untwisting the whole time. And it's not something that you're consciously doing. Your body's just doing it. Otherwise you'd be pulled this way. Right? You're resisting the force naturally. But you probably have a little bit more to go. So having that tactile cue under there, even though it's not really, because it's not very thick, so it's not really doing very much. And what's nice is that this is a cushioned seat, which sometimes it's harder to use other apparatus when you're on a cushion anyway. Sometimes it's easier because you can feel it more when it's a firmer surface, but it still works. Like when I sat down there, like it's pretty significant. You notice it. Yeah. And that's all it is, just enough to notice it. We were just observing how valuable having this little teeny tiny rolled towel underneath your pelvis and having the brick underneath the foot made such a difference to not only centering and leveling the pelvis, but also centering your spine. So that's going to assist not only your body, but your task at hand here. So, okay, let's go ahead and turn that back on. So as you're leaning forward, this is a really common issue that so many of us have. Yeah, shoulders just want to creep up to those ears. So pulling the shoulders down, which is actually work down the sides of the back. So the lats are doing a lot of the work to help keep the shoulders stabilized down. And even though this might feel like your comfortable position to let your shoulders come up, go ahead and let your shoulders come up like they like to do. This is actually going to be a less stable position for you to be in. So if you pull the shoulders down, keep the elbows pulled in, that's actually going to give you more stability and more strength here. And then what's happening up above the shoulders, so what's happening with the head and the neck is going to be significant as well. And a lot of this is going to depend on your size, like the length of your spine, the length of your neck. If you're a taller person, if you have a longer spine, if you have a long neck, those are all going to be pieces that you have to work with your own body and be mindful of. So even taking some time to do some neck stretches, maybe you just kind of move your head around while you're working, because we get so involved, so engrossed in this task, and it can become such a Zen process that we might forget about the rest of what's happening, and your body is very important to the process. So she's got this nice cushy mat. So most of the time you're working in a space that is a concrete floor. So the surface that you're standing on, what's on your feet, can have a significant effect. So if you have the ability to have a nice cushion like this, that's great. Paying attention to, and I'll talk more specifically about footwear. I'll show a couple examples. But something that's flat, something that is wide enough for your foot, so a wide enough toe box, and that has a fair amount of cushion. So the height of your surface is going to matter. And one of the things that we were talking about specifically, like one of the things that Gloria is dealing with is in working for a long time, you get so engrossed in your work, and all of a sudden you find that you've been leaning over, looking at your work, doing your work, and then the other side starts to hurt. And by the time it starts to hurt, it's kind of hard to undo it. It's kind of hard to get out of that. So giving yourself a chance to take breaks as frequently as makes sense. So, you know, like I could tell you to take a break every 20 minutes, which would probably be ideal, but that might not be ideal for your work, right? So you can set a timer, you can set a reminder on your phone, something that gives you the chance to create that new habit of stopping and taking a break. And taking a break doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop what you're doing and go somewhere else or wash your hands and do something so you can do some exercises. Like taking a break can literally be, you're going to stand up, you're going to center yourself, you're going to maybe do some neck stretches, which can just be something as simple as moving your head around. Maybe you do some reaches to stretch your back. You can do, you can move the head around to get some neck stretches in there. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. Like you don't have to go, oh, what should I do? Just like move your body. Like you're just doing something different. It can be easy little twists in here. You can do, you know, some quick little leg stretches. Like it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be specific. Just move. So your breaks can be just a, you know, quick, I'm going to change what I'm doing for a second, and then back to what you're doing. So if you have something, if you could set it on your phone to like remind you every 20 minutes to stop and take a moment. If you're in a place like this is a really beautiful space where we've got big open doors where you can actually look out and give your eyes a break also. So we tend to forget about our eye muscles. So we're working in, we're focusing in close, and you're doing all of this work for maybe many hours without taking a chance to look past 20 inches in front of you. So giving yourself a chance to take an eye break and look out, see what's the furthest thing you can see, what can you focus on outside, or even 20 or 30 feet away from you versus just the 20 inches in front of you. So taking breaks, and then how you're standing. So depending on what you're doing, your stance might change. So if you can keep yourself centered, great, but that's not always going to be feasible. Sometimes you might find yourself doing a lot of bending over. So if you can raise the surface up higher, or you don't have to do that bending over, or you sit down. Yeah. Or so like we're working on the board here, like you could raise this board up. You can even take a couple of these little buckets and stack those underneath to raise the board up. So again, it doesn't have to be that you have to go get the really expensive multi-height thing. You can use what you have to make the environment work better for you so that you don't have to take the brunt in your physical body. So one of the things that we were talking about earlier is that lean over and the other side. So what happens just kind of biomechanically in the body, if you're leaning to one side or you've got more weight on one side, you've probably experienced this carrying a heavy bag, might have been a purse, might have been a child, right? You're carrying something on one side, the other side of the body is going to try to right you. So if you're constantly leaning over and it's been an hour and you're leaning to the right, the left side of your back is trying to pull you back up or resist that lean so you're not falling all the way over. So those frequent breaks will help to mitigate that a little bit as well. So it'll give you a chance to not be in that position for an hour at a stretch. So I don't want to get into too much of the technical details. But it's important to know, not just for your work here, but also just in your daily life, like what does your body do? So a lot of us have a tendency to stand with the pelvis forward, and then the shoulders kind of pull back where the rib cage lifts up, and this is how we balance ourselves in that position. So if you're standing at your kitchen sink doing your dishes, you oftentimes might find that your belly gets wet because it's pressed up against the counter. So that's a really good cue. You don't have that cue here, but to keep thinking of kind of bringing your weight back into your heels, Maybe getting into a little bit of the stance that we were talking about in the picking something up, where you have maybe a little bit wider stance with your feet, maybe a little bit of a knee bend, maybe a little bit of a hinge forward at the hips, so that you have your torso in a position that is strong, that allows you to move here, rather than being in that forward flexed position in the back. So your shoes are actually pushing you forward because you have a little heel in your shoe. So if you had a flatter shoe, it would be easier. Your shoe wouldn't be automatically pushing you onto your toes. So, and then another thing that I'm guessing probably doesn't happen as much when you're working here, like when you're in the example that I gave of like doing dishes where you're leaned up against the counter, you don't really have a chance to lean on anything here because you have to use your arms. So you either have to use your legs or your butt or your back to hold you up. So something has to hold you up here, unless you're sitting, in which case a lot of the stuff we talked about with sitting posture over the wheel will still be applicable.
Okay, Breena, you're on.
Okay, so I'm not going to say too much in between. I have a list of notes, and I made a couple more notes during the video, and so I think I'll just make a couple clarification notes, and then we'll do the stretching portion, and then I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. I find that when I'm dispensing this information, I've been doing this for so long, it all seems really obvious to me. And so sometimes I forget some of the really basic things that you might not know, because to me, they seem like second nature. So if I glossed over something or completely missed a point and you're like, what about, feel free to ask those questions. But just a couple clarifications. When I was talking about, there were actually two places where I talked about maybe an adjustable height surface or an adjustable height seat. So I didn't say an adjustable height seat, but Gloria mentioned sitting down to change the height of the work surface. And so I just made a note, like you could have a stool that, you know, like the little thing they have at the hairdresser that, you know, goes up and down. Because an office chair is probably not going to work so well in, you know, in your pottery work. But they have a lot of really fancy adjustable height tables. It doesn't have to be that fancy. It can literally be stacking. And I thought it was in the video, and maybe I missed it, or maybe we cut it out. But she was actually, when at that last section, she was working on a board. So the board's movable, right? You could put something underneath the board to raise it up. It can literally be bricks. It can be buckets. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Use what you have, right? You've got stuff. So just stick it underneath there to raise up the surface, or lower yourself down if you need to sit to be able to work on something. And again, you might not even realize it. Like you start, you're standing, you're upright, and then you get into the detail work and you get in closer and closer and closer. And pretty soon you're in that really funky position and you don't realize it because you're so, right? So there's the idea of ergonomics, right? We've all heard of ergonomics. And I always like to clarify what ergonomics actually is. So ergonomics is not for us to, it's meant to, it's intended for the workplace, for a worker to work longer with less risk of injury. So it's for more productivity, not for more health, right? So I like to point that out. But you can think about those similar principles if you're familiar with like the height of your chair and the height of your keyboard at the computer and the eye level of your screen. You can transition those same principles over to anything else that you might be doing, like your craft. So there were several places where I talked about the shoulders. So if you find yourself just constantly raising your arms up because your work surface is too high, see if you can lower it down or raise yourself up higher. when I was talking, I made the point at the wheel about the wheel is rotating. It's doing its thing and you're stabilized in front of it. And I talked about the wheel is rotating you and you're having to resist the rotation. It's not a conscious thing, but it's happening inside your body, because if it wasn't, you'd be pulled this way. You'd be pulled the direction of the wheel. So I just wanted to clarify that point so that it kind of drives home the point of the importance of twists in your corrective exercise or in your restorative exercise, because you're being pulled one way. And that's also the same with the one-sided thing, the work that you're doing that might be one-sided. It's like any other rotational activity. Most of it's one-sided, so it's good to go the other way. If you're a golfer, you swing the club one way, but they tell you to swing it the other way too, right? You might not hit the ball the other way, but you got to swing it the other way to help balance the forces out. And one of the things that we talked about off camera while we were doing the wheel part is using like one of these balance discs. If you've seen one of these air-filled cushions, this is a great thing to sit on at the wheel. And I was kind of playing with this before we started tonight. And I was like, that would be awesome. Because you can actually, this is a pretty thick one, and you can obviously have more or less air, but you can allow this, it doesn't go like this, but your pelvis on top of it can go this way, and it can go this way. So the idea of kind of putting that towel underneath the sit bones, this would be a good alternative to that also. I don't know if Gloria managed to snag that one at the thrift store, but that day we were talking, there was one at the thrift store around the corner. So, I forgot about that. So I wanted to make sure I showed you that part. And I think everything else other than the shoes, which I'll talk about, I think at the end. No, I'll talk about it now. I don't want to forget anything. So I mentioned, Barbara said, you talked about shoes, but then you didn't say anything about the shoes, because I was going to give you an example. So this is what I mean by the heel of the shoe is pushing you forward. So if you have a shoe, which most of your shoes are going to have a heel, to some degree, it might be 1/4 of an inch, all your flats, most of those have a heel. Might be 1/4 of an inch, might be 1/2 an inch, it might be an inch. So this is about an inch. So I'm gonna be the ground, and this is the leg. Okay, so here's your leg on top of your heeled shoe. So if you take this, whatever this is, 24-inch pool noodle, and take it up to a 5 or 6 foot tall person, that's a lot of force pushing you forward, that you have joints that you can adjust to bring yourself back to an upright position, but you're probably not actually upright because you've moved at the ankle and the knee and the hip and your spinal joints to get yourself back up. So having a flatter shoe really helps with without you having to do anything. So when I talk about getting your weight back into your heels and getting yourself vertical or upright, it's really hard to do if your shoe is working against you, right? So flat, flexible. This shoe is called Ultra. The brand is Ultra, A-L-T-R-A. They come in a variety of cushions, so that's a really big deal for working working on a concrete surface. Is you want to have the cushion. So a super minimal shoe like a Vibram 5-finger, something that's really, really flexible and really, really thin, which might be something that you can transition into, might not be the best shoe for the time that you're spending in the studio. So this is a really flexible shoe. See how the whole thing is flexible, not just one place? The whole entire bottom is flexible, and it's totally flat. So the distance that your heel is away from the floor and the distance the ball of your foot is away from the floor is the same. So that would be a good shoe choice, and then a shoe that is wide enough for your foot to actually fit in it. So a really fun thing to do, go get your favorite pair of shoes after this is over. Don't do it right now. After this is over, go get your favorite pair of shoes, put your foot right on top of it. And if your foot is wider than your shoe is not wide enough for your foot. Okay, so that's a really good point. But flat, flexible, wide enough for the foot, for the ball of your foot, and enough cushion for your surface. Oh, Crocs might be another good choice. beautiful as they are, that might be a good choice for working in the studio. Plus you can get those fun little charm things that stick in the holes, right? I don't know, I've never had Crocs. They're not very attractive, but they might be a good choice for a flat, wide shoe. Okay, should I take any questions right now, or should we just do a quick stretch? Quick being like 20 minutes.
Let's do a stretch.
Okay, I'm gonna talk fast in case you haven't already figured it out. I'm a fast talker because I'm trying to get as much in for you as possible. This portion will be made available as well as, I filmed a separate exercise instructional portion, but it was way too long. So we decided to do it live, and it's still gonna be too long, but it's not too long because it's gonna feel good, it's good for our bodies. So let's do this. I'm gonna do the first part seated in a chair. So if you are already seated in a chair, then you can be there. If you have arms on your chair, they might get in your way for some of this. So if you have an armless chair, that would be good. Or you can stand for that portion of it as well. But just so you can see what it's like using the chair, I'm going to use a chair. And then for the rest of what we're going to do, the only other things that you will need are a towel, like a hand towel or a dish towel that you can roll up like we did like you saw in the video. And then either a hardcover book, or if you happen to have a yoga block laying around, and maybe even like a rolled up yoga mat. But it doesn't have to be a yoga mat. Your rolled up towel can work. You'll at least get the gist of it. So let's just begin. I'm just going to go, and I'm going to bring you down just a little bit. I might have to adjust that again when I stand up. All right, so we're just going to do some shoulder rolls. So I'm going to try and keep an eye on the time. Maybe I'll go a little faster now that I can see the time. So you're going to just do some shoulder rolls just to move the shoulders and the neck muscles. Go all the way around. So that means go all the way back, all the way up, all the way forward, and all the way down. And then go ahead and reverse that circle. So one of the things I mentioned when she was at the wheel was I was talking about neck position and head position. So if you think about sliding your face back away from your screen, and I'll remind you of that a couple of times, go ahead and relax the shoulders. We're going to drop one ear to one shoulder. Just let the head relax over to that shoulder. The opposite arm, you can take out to the side, palm up. Elbows down low, it's below your shoulder, and then you're going to let that elbow slide away from your shoulder just a little bit. Your palm is up. And then go ahead and let that hand start to drop towards the floor. Exhale in case you're holding your breath because you're so excited. Relax that arm, bring your head back up, drop the opposite ear to the opposite shoulder. Slide your face back. Take the opposite arm out to the side, palm up. Elbows relax down, shoulder is heavy, relaxing down away from the ear. Start to reach that elbow slightly away from you. And then start to let that hand drop towards the floor. Exhale. So go ahead and bring your head back up to center. Drop your chin down towards your chest, letting the back of your neck relax. Just a quick note about your sitting position. I'm sitting on the front edge of my chair, so I can be sitting up on my sit bone. So if you're way far back in your chair and your pelvis is tucked under, your tailbone is tucked under, maybe scooch forward a little bit and see if you can let yourself roll up onto your sit bones. Keeping your chest down, start to bring your chin up towards the ceiling, looking up. You can keep your teeth closed, your jaw closed to get that nice stretch in the front of the neck and the throat. Exhale. Go ahead and bring your face back to center. Turn to look out over your right shoulder. Imagine that you can get your chin to line up with your right shoulder without moving your shoulders, just by turning to look towards the right. Go ahead and bring your face back to center. Turn to look out over the left shoulder. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Imagine you can get your chin to line up over your left shoulder. And go and bring your face back to center. And we're going to do Frankenstein arms, but instead of being like monster arms, you're going to turn your palms to face each other. So your arms are parallel. Your wrists are about the width of your shoulders. And you're going to reach your fingertips forward. So you'll feel your upper back widen, your shoulder blades widen, that nice stretch across your upper back. And then slide your shoulders back. Try to squeeze your shoulder blades together. You see how your hands want to go wide? Keep your wrists the same distance as your shoulders. And then reach those fingertips forward so you can hardly tell I'm moving my arms forward and back. I shouldn't be able to see yours moving either. Slide your shoulders back, try to squeeze your shoulder blades together. And one more time, reach those fingertips forward. Relax your shoulders down away from your ears. Go ahead and clasp your hands together and reach those knuckles forward. Go ahead and drop your chin down to your chest. Let your upper back round forward. And exhale. Go ahead and relax those arms back down. And we're going to do like wall angels. I'm calling it wall angels in quotes because you probably aren't sitting against a wall right now, but you're going to make like snow angels against your imaginary wall. Reach those arms up towards the ceiling and back down towards the floor. Think about reaching the backs of your wrists towards that wall behind you. And as the arms come up overhead, try to keep your chest down, shoulders down. Reach those arms back down towards the floor. And one more time, reach it up. Nice big breath in. And exhale the arms back down. And now we're going to do peekaboo arms. Ready? It's as exciting as it sounds. You're going to put the elbows together and your palms together. So you're seamed up from your fingertips to your elbows. And you're going to keep your elbows glued together. We're all familiar with Gorilla Glue, right? We just put a little dab of Gorilla Glue between our elbows, and you're going to widen your wrists, but don't let those elbows come apart because there's Gorilla Glue there, so that would hurt. How wide can you get your wrists without separating your shoulders? I mean your elbows, sorry, because there's Gorilla Glue there. Go ahead and bring your palms back together. Flip the hands so that your pinkies are together, and try that again. Elbows stuck together, try to move at the wrists. You will probably find if you raise your elbows up higher, it's harder. And if you lower your elbows down lower, it's a little bit easier. Go ahead and bring your pinkies back together, put the palms back together again. Do that one more time, separate the wrists. So it's the wrists and not the hands. Trying to make like tongs with your arms. All right, go ahead and relax those arms. So a couple for the hands and the wrists. So you're going to make like an OK sign, thumb and index finger, and you're going to kind of lock your index fingernail with your thumb, right? Because that's how I make an OK sign, right? So hands are going to be pointed out to the side. So you want to try to get the O to point forward, and you're going to flex at the wrist or drop your fingertips down towards the floor, or think of trying to get your thumb to your forearm, like really flex at the wrist. Yeah, that's what you're doing. All right, go ahead and open up those hands. We don't have a lot of thumb stretches, but this is a really good one. You're going to reach your thumb across the palm and try to touch the pad of your pinky finger. See how your fingers are probably all doing like mine are? See if you can straighten. Can you straighten up your fingers? No, can't. Thanks for asking. All right, okay, go ahead and relax that. These are not easy. All right, palms together. You're going to drop your wrists towards the floor. So that's wrist extension. Keep the palms together, so don't let them separate. Keep them all together all the way up to the wrists. And then you're going to flip them over, so your fingertips are going to attempt to point straight down. Mine are not pointing down. Mine are pointing slightly forward. Sorry, that was my dog barking. All right, we're going to go back up with the hands, and we're going to flip them over so the backs of the hands are together. You can let your fingers kind of interlace with one another. Try to get your thumbs to touch. Same thing, you're going to keep the backs of the hands seamed up as you drop the wrists. Lovely forearm back of the hand stretch, yes. Okay, go ahead and relax that one. And we're going to do a couple more back of the hand stretches. So we're going to do a fist with locking the thumbs first. So you're going to wrap your thumb over your palm, wrap your fingers around, and then you're going to put the backs of the fingers against your waist and drop your wrists towards the floor. Drop your shoulders sorry, I'm getting my joints mixed up. Drop your shoulders towards the floor. It must be because I did this earlier and we just did those other stretches, because this is less intense for me than it was like an hour ago. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and release that, and we're gonna go the opposite direction. So we're gonna fold the fingers in first and then lock the index finger with the thumb. Don't let it go. Back to the hands against the body again.
Weird. What?
Towards the floor. I was gonna say, hi, Drew, I know you. All right, go ahead and release that. So while you're still seated, if you're doing this standing, you can do the rest of these standing, but it'll be easier if you're seated. We're gonna do easy seated twist. So you're gonna twist one direction. This is an easy seated twist. You're not gonna force this. You can set your hands down on your chair, on your leg, and give yourself a little bit of help for the twist, but don't force it. Easy. So your spine is straight up and down, you're on your sit bones, and you can add the neck by turning to look out over that shoulder. Remember that sliding your face back thing? You can do that here as well to keep your head stacked on top of the rest of your spine. Go ahead and come forward again and twist the other direction. You can use the hands gently to assist with that twist, and you can add the head by looking out over that opposite shoulder. Breathing. Right? This is a good place to practice breathing too. Take a nice deep breath in as you're twisting. And exhale, you might get a little bit more twist out of it on the exhale. Go ahead and come back to center. And we're going to do a little seated side bend here. So you can hold on to one side of your chair, reach up and over with one arm. Nice big stretch for the waist and the rib cage. Big breath in here. And exhale. And go ahead and come back up. Other side reaches up and over. So obviously this can be done standing as well. So a lot of what you're doing right now can be done during your work time. You don't have to go wash your hands for it. These are those easy, quick breaks you can take. So you can slip any of these stretches into your work time. Go ahead and come back up. So I want to talk just a little bit about the pelvic tilt. I'm going to turn sideways just so you can see what I'm doing. So this would be a place where you want to grab your little rolled up towel. If you have one, if you don't, you can just do this sitting on your chair. But the tactile cue of having the towel underneath your booty is helpful. So you're going to get it right underneath your sit bones. And if you have a flat chair, that's also easier as opposed to a chair that's kind of tipped backwards like a lot of chairs are, unfortunately. So hopefully whatever you've got underneath there, you can feel your sit bones underneath your butt. And it's kind of on the front side of the towel. So it helps your pelvis to roll forward. So we're going to do just a couple pelvic tilts. So you're going to tuck your tailbone under, tuck your pelvis back, probably feel a stretch in your low back, and then you're going to let your pelvis rock forward again so you're back up on your sit bones, or your sit bones are forward of that towel. And then you're going to tuck under, nice low back stretch, and come back up. And we're going to make that a little bit bigger, kind of a seated cat-cow or a arch and rounding of the spine, reflection and extension. So you're going to tuck the tailbone under. You're going to let your chest drop down. You can reach those arms forward so you get a nice rounding of your upper back, and you can drop your chin to your chest. And then you can go the opposite direction. So let your pelvis roll forward, let your chest lift, and let your chin lift and look up. And you can exhale as you round the spine forward, tucking the tailbone under, reaching the arms forward, rounding the upper back. And then you can inhale in the opposite direction as the pelvis goes forward, chest lifts, chin lifts, look up. And what else do I have? Let's stand up. So this part, you're going to want either the back of a tallish chair or a counter height. A chair seat or a table height might be a little bit too low for some of this. So I wanted you all to have a chance to practice that hip hinge. I talked about it a couple times in the video. So this is best done in front of a mirror because you can see where your parts are. So go play with this afterwards in front of a mirror. But we talked about that weight back in the heels thing. So if you shift your butt backwards till your hip is over your ankle or your weight is in your heels. So you can feel when your pelvis is forward, there's more weight on the front of your foot. When your pelvis is back, there's more weight in the heels. So if you take your hands and place your pinky fingers right in the hip creases, when you bend forward, your tailbone goes up, you still have all your spinal curves, so you still have a lumbar curve, and you should feel your fingers kind of getting pinched in there between your pelvis and your legs. Go ahead and stand back up. See if you can stand back up and keep your weight back in your heels. You might find your toes up in the air. Go ahead and do that one more time. Hinge forward at the hips and stand back up. So knees are straight for this one. So now we're going to do just tiny little baby squats. So it's like you're sitting in a chair. And I did film this separately also, so you'll have that. And I didn't have this at the time because my camera was on it. So if you think about sitting down, like I said in the video, like you're sitting down to a stool that you're not quite sure where the seat height is, your butt goes back. That helps keep your knees back. And your upper half is going to hinge forward, just like that same hip hinge that you did. And go ahead and stand back up. Try that again, little tiny squat. So you could actually use this. This could be a picking up position, right? That lifting and carrying first part of the video. This could be a bending forward and maybe doing some work. If it's a temporary thing, you're probably not going to want to be in this position working for a really long time, but it could be a temporary position. The little baby squats, thinking about butt back and untucking or sticking your butt out. So we're going to do a double calf stretch. Move this out of the way. So this would be a place for your rolled towel or a block or a book or even your rolled yoga mat. I'm going to use the rolled yoga mat just for demonstration purposes here. And I'm going to tip you down and take you back just a little bit so you can see the ground. Hope you can see the ground. I'm so tiny on the screen, I can't see myself very well. So you're going to put your feet up on something. It doesn't have to be really high, and you actually don't want it to be really high. And you can keep your feet flat on the ground. So if you get into this position and you're already like, it's too much stretch in my calves, go flat. So you're going to do that same hip hinge, bending forward at the hips, your butt goes back. You feel a nice stretch down the backs of your legs. It can be more in the calf for some of us. It can be more in the hamstrings for some of us. The whole back of your legs could be screaming at you right now, but your knees are straight. Bonus points if you can relax your quadriceps, the muscles on the fronts of your thighs. That's your double calf stretch. The multi-purpose exercise. Go ahead and stand back up. So a thoracic stretch is going to look very similar. The position is going to be very similar, but you're not going to have anything under your feet, and it's focusing more on the spine. So same thing, you're going to hinge forward. This is a place where you want your hands higher rather than lower. So I'm using the back of the chair for this one. Hands on a wall would work also. So you're going to hinge forward again. This time we're thinking about the spine. So you're going to let your chest drop down between the arms. Hopefully it already feels good. If the backs of your legs are really tight, go ahead and bend your knees a little bit. So sometimes the backs of the legs get in the way of stretching the spine. So go ahead and let the knees bend if you need to. And if it bugs your shoulders, let your elbows bend a little bit. So you're letting the chest sink down towards the floor. Imagine there's a hand gently pressing between your shoulder blades, allowing that part of your spine to drop towards the floor. Hopefully that feels good. This is a really great stretch to do while you're working. You can even think of dragging your rib cage back away from your armpits. If that makes any sense to you. And go ahead and stand back up. And then we're going to do just a leg swing. So this is a good one to be elevated on. So I'm going to use my yoga block, but if you have a book, if you don't have anything to stand on, you can just do this standing on the ground, but it's easier if your foot is up on something. So I'm going to step up on my block. You can step up on a book or whatever you've got handy. And you're just going to, and you can hold on. This doesn't have to be a balance exercise. You're just going to let the free legs swing. And for some of us, just letting the leg relax and swing is going to be a challenge because we're so used to keeping everything stiff and holding. So just let the hip relax, let the leg swing. See if the knee bends when the leg goes back, you're pretty good chance that your leg is actually relaxed. If you're still like doing, some robotic thing, just let it go like a rag doll. Let's try it on the other side. So this is good for releasing the hip flexors, the psoas. You've got hip stuff. If you spend a lot of time sitting, which many of us do, this is a really good one for releasing some of those tight spots. All right, and then the last one is just going to be a standing lunge, just real easy. Again, for opening up the front of the hip. So I'm going to do the standing from the side. So you're going to step back with one leg. I'm going to be up on the ball of my foot because I can't get my heel to the floor here. The front knee is going to bend slightly. The back knee can be bent as well. And you're going to think about tucking your tailbone under. So that tucking of the tailbone is going to open up the front of the hip. So hopefully already you feel that stretch across the front of the hip crease there, and maybe all the way down the front of your leg to your knee. I do. And then go ahead and try that on the other side. Switch legs. I'll go ahead and turn to face you for that one. Step that leg back. You can be up on the ball of the foot. Front knee can bend slightly. And you're going to think about tucking the tailbone under, getting that nice stretch across the hip crease. Maybe down into the quads. I can feel it all the way to my knee. And then go ahead and stand back up. And that is the exercise portion of tonight's event.
Great, Breena. Thank you. Does everybody feel like the blood's moving around now?
I gotta go do pottery now.
How
That was
about
amazing.
questions?
Thank
Do
you.
we have any questions for Breena?
Will these exercises be on the video? Thank you.
Yes. Yes. If they'll take everything that I filmed, you'll have 3 separate, well, I guess 4 separate things. The video that you already watched, the one that you haven't seen yet, which is more details. Like, we went through everything really fast here. So more details, the flow that we just did, and then this actual thing, the meeting itself is put up there as well, right, Barbara?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So
Thank you
you'll have
very much.
you'll have the meeting with this group of exercise, and then there'll be a separate exercise video.
Oh,
All right.
Yeah, so you can literally just hit play on that and go through that.
But the important thing is you need to subscribe to the Guild's YouTube channel, and I'm going to post that URL in the chat, so you can copy it, paste it, and then hit the subscribe button.
okay.
So do we have any questions for Breena?
Oh, I see a couple notes in the chat here. Secretary chairs go up and down and have no armrests and removable backs. Oh, that's perfect. I love it. What kind of shoe is good for the wheel? I don't know if that was posted before or after I showed shoes. So if John, was that from you?
That came after. Yeah.
Okay. I wear Ultra in all my work. They sell at REI. REI offers 1-year window for return of shoes. Holy moly, that's awesome.
Yeah. So if you want to give them a try, and I swear by Ultras, you can get a pair, try them on, wear them. If you don't like them, they'll take them back.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, when you're starting to explore a different shoe type, it's going to feel really weird. It's going to look weird to your eye. Your foot is going to look like a different shape because it's going to look more like a foot. And that's not what you're used to seeing inside your shoe. You're used to seeing a shoe-shaped foot, which most shoes are not shaped like feet. So as far as what type of shoe to wear at the wheel, I don't really know how best to answer that question. If there's more specifics to what you're asking, John, I'd love to.
I wear.
Yeah, really what my question is because you have a pedal that's angled up, then do you need to counteract that with the shoe? The idea of the brick, I've tried that. That's a fantastic idea, and that helps a lot. But is there anything that you suggest on that?
Your whole entire foot is on the pedal, correct? So it's not like a gas pedal on a car where you're doing this all the time. So I would say that the same thing would apply. And you may end up having a little bit more subtle control. One of the things about shoes that most of us don't realize, and you know, we're being marketed to, like, shoot, obviously, so there was this kind of pendulum swing from regular shoes to minimal shoes, and then people started getting injured, and it swung back to maximal shoes. So if you're familiar with Hokas, I think that's how you say it, they're crazy thick, big shoes. The further away from the ground your foot is, the less sensory input your brain is getting. Your brain has no idea where your foot is in space. So I would think that a thinner soled shoe would be more helpful, and then you wouldn't need the cushion because you're not standing for that portion of the time. So like I would think a Croc would not be a good choice for that reason, for sitting, but you might just have to play with it. You might just have to experiment a little bit.
I wear
Thanks.
I wear orthotics, and I find that I can put them in my Crocs and I can stand all day.
That's great.
And
That's
they're
great.
waterproof, and it doesn't matter if clay sloshes on them.
Right. That was why I actually did a little research with a friend of mine who is also a restorative exercise specialist and a professional artist, and so she gave me a few suggestions, and that was where the suggestion of Crocs came from, actually.
Yeah.
Because she was like, it's got to be stuff that you can wash, and you know, like for flooring, you have to be able to hose it off, and so you know, like those cushioned mats are really great for the standing work time. I thought I had another thought, but I seems I don't.
I have another question.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any feedback or experience in the relation of the potter sitting at the wheel and wheel height?
Well, not
Because it's
personal
kind of
experience.
I mean, I like to sit on, I mean, I like my stool to be at the height that my legs, my thighs are parallel to the floor. My legs are fairly straight down. But I try with different levels, like how the wheel relates to that sitting posture. And none of them are great.
Well, exactly. So being mindful, and one of the things that we talked about, I watched a bunch of videos too. So there were, you know, videos of having a mirror in front of the wheel, so you can see what your body is doing, but you can also see you can see what your work is doing, but you can also see what your body is doing. So if you have an opportunity to even temporarily have a mirror to your side, so you can actually see how your body moves.
Good idea.
You might not realize how much spinal flexion you have. But a really important thing to note, which is why I can't give you like a blanket answer as far as work surface height, is because your leg length and your spine length, so your body's dimensions, we all have different dimensions, right? We all have different length legs and different length spines. So when you're sitting, if you have a really long spine and shorter legs, you're going to have to be in a spinal flexion to reach your work, which is not great for long-term back use, right? So like you said, you might just have to experiment and find the least detrimental position. You might not be able to find that perfect position. And that's just the nature of, you know, it's just the nature of some of the activities we choose, you know, like ballet is the greatest for our bodies, but, you know.
Does anybody here have a standing wheel?
I swear by it. I was having leg and back pain sitting at a wheel for so many hours, and I finally put extensions on my wheel legs, and I've been standing for 10, 15 years now, and I don't have hardly any of the problems I had when I was sitting.
That's awesome. That is great to hear. So, and that takes away one of the factors that I was just talking about, right? So now you're only having to deal with your spine height or your spine length, and you can adjust that height to fit you a lot more easily. Not necessarily it's not necessarily feasible for every single person, but if you can do that, the more that you can adapt your environment to your body rather than making your body adapt to your environment, the better off your body is going to be, the longer your parts are going to last. right? So it's not just about longevity of being able to do pottery. It's about longevity of this thing lasting for as long as you want to do whatever you want to do.
Mhm. Well, so far, just since this began and since you started talking, I've ordered an adjustable stool that's padded in one of those little balanced puffy air-filled things. Because it's like, I don't like the stool that I sit on.
But did you order one of these too?
A towel, I have that.
Oh, you already have one of those? Okay.
Where did you order the puffy thing?
Amazon.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm totally serious. When I was at the pottery studio, the thrift store that was right around the corner, there was one there. I was there the day before. It was $5. I have 2 of these, and I bought them both at thrift stores. So
What are they called?
they're usually called a balance disc. This one happens to be, the brand is Go Fit, and I'm not sure I have another one, and I'm not sure what brand it is.
I got one on Amazon. And it was a quilter's cushion.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, the one I ordered was like under
I
15
swear
bucks.
by it. I swear by it too. I'll sit on it, and you can it's kind of like sitting on one of those exercise balls
Yeah.
that you can actually move your spine around, and you
Uh-huh.
can easily get yourself in a different position.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
In case you're not familiar, I have a tiny little stool here. Look at that cute little tiny little stool. And it's got a nubby side, so if you need a butt massage, you can get a butt massage. But so this makes it really easy to rock the pelvis. So where I was talking about that side view, you might not realize how much time you spend in this position, right? So see that? And another really big difference, besides just what's happening on your back, is what's happening on the front. So when I'm in this position, my core is here to stabilize my spine. When I'm in this position, it's not. Your core muscles can't really do a whole lot when you're in spinal flexion. So besides all the stuff that's the kind of obvious stuff that you might not realize is happening on the back, this is a much stronger, stable position for you to work in. Just like I said in the video, the shoulder position. So if you're in a position where your shoulders are creeping up, and I would say most of us, if not all of us, have this habit of the shoulders coming up to the ears, right? So, and it's insidious. It's one of the very first things I can remember working on, and I remember it so very distinctly working on that habit. It was just constantly here, constant. So you can practice it in your car when you're driving. Relax your shoulders. Anything else? Anybody else? Questions?
Well,
That's
Breena,
awesome.
thank you. I think by the number of people I saw moving around, you certainly have captured people's attention and given people some real good tools to use to help their potting.